Hello, and you are back in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. This is our 90th episode, and today we'll be discussing that they're getting desperate for votes, and convicted felon means nothing. So we're going to jump right into this. I got this article from News Addict. Biden unveils shock new executive order. This is a pretty short one, but there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with the Biden administration and immigration. So there's a fresh immigration executive order on Tuesday came following a prolonged period of asserting that he had no power to address the ongoing crisis at the southern border. The executive action by Biden entails a temporary halt on new asylum requests when the daily average of migrants crossing the U.S.-Mexico border reaches 2,500 over a week. Once the daily average drops back to 1,500 asylum requests can be resumed under the order. He says, quote, "Today I am joined by a bipartisan group of governors, members of Congress, law enforcement officials. Most of them live and work along the southern border. They know the border is not a political issue to be weaponized. The responsibility we share to do something about it. They have time. Don't have time to play games in Washington, and neither do the American people. This moving past Republican obstruction and using executive authorities available to me as president to do what I can to address the border. Would have preferred to address the issue for bipartisan legislation, because the only way to get the kind of system we have broken now is fixed." So again, there's a lot of stuff like saying, like 3.5 million or something like that, people getting naturalized, being able to vote, who were immigrants. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. But anyway, it's an election year. And election years are where politicians pretend to care about you and do stuff that benefits the population, so they can get those so they can get the populace to vote for them. And this is no exception. So Biden can't even remain continent. Like, he can't even have control of his pelvic floor, apparently. He's not the one who's making these decisions and doing these things. Complete puppet head. And for the most part, I would say probably, I don't know, post-Kennedy, I would say most of the presidents have been more figureheads than actual heads of state, I would say. But that's a whole other discussion. Anyway, the Biden administration and the handlers, we talk about the globalists, the UNWEF people. They don't want countries to have borders. They want people to be global citizens. They want this absolute freedom of travel, or such, or I guess travel on their terms, or more or less just importing the third world into the first world, because it's really what causes the most societal destruction, right? If you have these collapsing birth rates in the first world countries, and instead of reinforcing your cultural values, building a strong culture, and reigniting people's desire and ability to build families, that's the only long-term way to have a country, right? Is to have the population maintain birth rates at replacement levels. The other solution to that, if you want to try and maintain the country, is to just import people from other parts of the world, and that's what the agenda has been. But again, they want to create the idea of people being global citizens, so that's the plan. But again, a lot of people don't like this. It's an election year, so to try and appeal to the swing voters that want a more secure border, that want immigration to be under control, stuff like this is going to happen. And again, it's going to be depicted as saving the border crisis. He's going to, all the Republicans just didn't want this to happen, but he's going to make it happen because he's the, best thing to ever happen to anybody ever, Joe Biden, right? But that's the way they're going to sell it. I'm sure they're going to probably actually... They might actually, close some things off, divorce some people, do some stuff that would be good in securing the border up until after November, and either he gets another term or he becomes a lame duck. And then, if he does become a lame duck, it's just going to be going scorched earth. They're going to try and do as much as they possibly can to give as much of a mess for Trump to clean up, right? But this whole thing is that they don't actually, Joe Biden, the administration, do not actually care about having a secure country, right? They do not care about the border situation or the people there, or fixing this crisis, or having a situation where You have people who have been here their entire lives, paying into the system, doing everything quote unquote right, and they're the ones who have to pay for it, right? Laken Riley, 22 years old, natural born citizen, loses her life to, someone who hopped the border here illegally. And that's, not to say that I particularly care for these artificial lines that we draw, but if we have a country, then we need to enforce the border, right? If we're going to decentralize and we're going to build a voluntary society in this country, first we need to actually have the ability to know who can even be here in the first place. And then it gets on to the more, voluntary anarchistic thing of like, can borders even exist? But again, if you have private property, you don't just let anybody onto there. And that's really the whole thing that I view this as. So the whole, issue of the border being something that can't be enforced, and from the anarchist perspective, I am sympathetic to that. But living in reality, the average American's life, especially the people who are moral, upstanding citizens, whether they were born here or they immigrated and they went through, the process that the state says you have to go through, and, they're paying into the system, they're operating legitimately. These are the people who have to pay the most. These are the people who will suffer the most, and then it's just handing out free shit, giving a free pass, having, this whole propaganda machine try and make it seem like, all these economic migrants aren't just, here for, to better their economic standing, being opportunistic. And again, that's not inherently the worst thing in the world, but it's not a justification to just import these people and also, degrade the working base and the quality for society and all these sorts of things. And of course, you've got all the human trafficking, all the drug trafficking that's going on at the border. And again, in the long term, especially if Biden gets a second term, none of this is really going to be happening too much. We'll have, this little bit of, this act of like, we're securing the border, we care about it, we're doing everything we can. And then it's going to be right back to business as usual if they get elected again. And then when 2028 comes around, they're going to pretend to do it again because they want to install another Democrat into office. And that's just the way things are. So I do not think all this is really just a farce. So whenever we're talking about the border or talking about any sort of issue, this isn't because they want to make the lives of the American people better. They just want to buy votes. And this is how they're going to do it. They're going through the immigration angle, because that's one of the bigger issues, I would say, is immigration for this election season. Especially, you have stuff like Laken Riley. You have this like unprecedented amount of people crossing the border. You have all the issues with fentanyl and all of this. So it's a very it's a very big issue for a lot of people, and I imagine a lot of people would, a lot of the swing voters would swing one way or the other, and there are, I guarantee, swing voters that don't want to vote for Trump would over the border, and would see stuff like this happening, saying, oh, well, I guess Biden is going to be able to secure a border, vote for Biden. And again, not that they actually care. I'm not even to say that like Trump is like the end all and be all. Like if Trump gets into office, like all these problems are going to be solved. It's a very complicated thing to solve. And again, if we did decentralize, and you had the people who could, get that land at the border and actually defend it, that'd be the much more preferable thing. But wishful thinking. But with that, we're going to move on to the second topic of the day. You're still sticking with me, my rambling. Thank you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But we got this from the Western Journal. It says watch. The article will be linked below so you can watch this. But MTG flips script on reporter who calls Trump convicted felon. Intense exchange. So was George Floyd. So, getting into this little spat. But again, you have this, hearings and all this, nonsense that goes on in Congress where they're, debating stuff. But anyway, one's, talking to MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, about Trump being a convicted felon and how all these Republicans worship him, and using that to really just drag and smear Trump, right? And that's what I want to talk about, not this individual interaction between MTG, because, I don't care about Marjorie Taylor Greene. But what's happening is, with Trump getting convicted, and I talked about this, is that, it's not really going to change much. I doubt that, there's going to be like him being in prison before the election, because that would just really fire people up. So I imagine he's going to appeal it, and then they'll say, oh, the appeal happened like I don't know, in November, after the election. It'll be like, late November or something like that. I have a feeling that's what's going to most likely happen. They'll shoot it down, and then they'll try and just put him in prison after they've gotten the election again. That's what they want to do. But, could they, have that sentencing happen on the 11th, and they just, give him like a steep fine or whatever? Who the hell knows? But again, what they want is to have Donald Trump basically just be the Antichrist. That is what he is in their mind. He's like the secular Antichrist to a lot of people. It's just the embodiment of everything evil and bad you could possibly think of is what Trump is to these people. So when Trump got the conviction, and you can call him a convicted felon now, they're going to use that to drag him through the mud, even though really all he's accused of is that, he paid Stormy Daniels $130,000 and he didn't report it properly. And that's really what they're getting him at for. It's not a crime that has any meaningful sort of victim. You could argue, he went about in a way that was shady. He wasn't, respecting the sanctity of his marriage, which, Trump is a pretty sleazy guy, and a lot of these politicians are very extremely sleazy. So, it's, glass house and stones, calling the kettle black, when a lot of these people say, like, Trump's sexual deviant, and he's, the way he treats women, yada, yada, all that BS, very much, like I said, pot calling the kettle black. Is it something that, like, I wouldn't say but again, it's not a good thing that, Trump was doing what he did with Stormy Daniels and had to, pay her $130,000 so she wouldn't talk about it, right? But the whole thing is that that's not a victim. That's not a crime that has a victim, right? It's just something that you could say, well, he didn't go about it the right way and he reported it improperly. And again, that's even debatable considering how biased the freaking court was that made this decision, right? But to say, oh, he was a convicted felon of 34 counts, right? To just make him seem like he's a serial killer or like this serial rapist or someone who like robbed an entire strip mall or something like that at gunpoint. That's really what they want you to think of when they call Trump a convicted felon, and that's why this all happened in the first place. And of course, getting Trump imprisoned is what they want. Like I said, he's the secular Antichrist basically. So he's just evil incarnate. So there's no real meaningful reason for him to be in prison, but they just want him in prison because they think that like it's going to be like ushering in some sort of utopia, like it would be the best thing to ever happen. And again, the funny thing is, if Trump just died, went away, was in prison or whatever, then what happens next with all the people who have this rampant TDS? What do they do now? That would be absolutely hilarious to see, because Trump is going to go away at some point. Like, media won't be able to farm him for clicks. People won't have to, headlines and sound bites for them to lose their minds over. So they're going to have to move on and do something else, and that's going to be the funny thing to say. But again, this whole thing is just really sad. It's just another issue in society to wedge us apart, to keep this polarization going, and that's really what they want. And again, a lot of this is that there is this massive hate boner for Donald Trump, and just any means they can to smear him, to drag him, to label him as stuff that's bad is what they're going to do, which is why the convicted felon is going to get thrown around so many times. They put billboards up saying, like, would you vote for a convicted felon? All that stuff. It's really just to make him seem like I said, he's a serial rapist. He murdered a bunch of people. He did all this evil stuff, right? That's what people associate with the term felon. Like when you think of a convicted felon, when you think of someone who did something that was felonious, you think of, murder, you think of, rape, you think of armed robbery, you think of these very heinous things that people do. They get charged with felons, they get in prison for a long time. That's what they want people to associate Trump with. That's why they're going to be using this convicted felon line, probably, now until the end of time. For some people, that's really it. And they're going to think like, oh, it's a good thing, right? This happened. This is like him, being held to account. That no one's above the law. When I find it absolutely hilarious, because there definitely is a class of people who are above the law, and Trump's conviction is to make it seem like those people don't exist. That's really it. It's just a massive freaking distraction. Do not like it, and again, it's just a very polarizing thing, and it's going to make Trump this more polarizing figure than he already is. And again, it's going to make the term convicted felon meaningless, because once they push this through with Trump and they can keep on doing this, they're going to use the state and lawfare against more people. You've seen it with the January 6ers. They're going to keep on doing that. They are going to come for you because they do not want anyone who advocates for freedom to be free. That's the way I feel it. But with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. And we're heading out into the outro now. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Joker the Fool. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or Substack. And be sure to subscribe to my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com, to keep up with Machine to Man and all my other projects.